Hi, everyone. I hope you've enjoyed the day as much as I have in all of the sessions. This is our last one, formal one for this afternoon, and we're excited to have our speakers today with us. They're going to be speaking to us about cohesion through communication, strategies for connecting across divides. And once again, we will show you our land acknowledgement statement, being proud of where we are and the people that we serve and the people that we live with daily. I will introduce our, oops, did I go past the speakers? Is there one that actually has your pictures on it?
A little after the meeting. So.
Okay, there we go. Okay. But they don't have your names.
Yeah.
Well, I guess I can't introduce them, so I'll have Nena introduce them for us. That'd be okay? All right, thank you. And we'll turn it over to them.
Hi, everybody. So I'm Nena Bloom, and I'm presenting here with Erin Gill in the room, and Amber Martin and Rachel Rice are online, and we'll give our titles and more information and when we get to each section of our presentation. Thank you. So we're going to run an experiment. We're going to exit out of the presentation and go to a survey. So just use your camera for the QR code or enter the Mentimeter code and put in your information, and we'll get a feel for who's in the room and online. Who's winning the race? Central Post Award. Although it's a pretty good distribution. So thank you for that. I think we're going to call it. Yeah, no, it's a pretty even distribution of all the different aspects of research administration, and that sort of reflects our approach to this topic of communication. We're going to want to come at it from each of our own personal perspectives and give you a little bit of a different look into this topic, this hot topic. So with that, I'm going to hand it off to Rachel, who's going to start us off.
Thank you, Erin. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Rachel Rice, but we'll talk about me a little bit later. First, we're going to talk about our presentation, Cohesion through Communication. And this is a tri-institutional talk. We do have a representative from every Arizona institution, as it were, on this presentation today. So that's pretty exciting. As we go through, we'll introduce our roles, with whom we communicate, and how we communicate. We'll share effective communication strategies and how they play a part in the work that we do day to day. And at the end, we'll save time for questions. And if we have bonus time at the end, we'll do scenarios and discussion. Next slide, please. All right, so now we're going to think about a time when you recently effectively communicated challenging information. It could be to a coworker, it could be something to your boss, it could be a loved one, whatever the case may be. But think about a time when you recently effectively communicated challenging information. Next slide, please. So, did you use a particular strategy? If so, think about how you use this strategy to communicate this information. Was it well received? How did it go? Just think about that as we go through today's presentation. Next slide, please. So, we did offer a resource for everyone here, the norms of collaboration, which have detailed descriptions for each particular one. And as we go through our presentation today, we will incorporate all 7 of these into our presentation and talk about it a little bit more and how to effectively communicate. Next slide.
I will add that these resources are available for the Zoom attendees on the day 1 navigation guide.
Thank you.
Me.
Oops. All right. Whoop, 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 whoop. All right, there we go. Okay, so we're going to go through what each one of these are, right? So there are 7 altogether. So using the norms of collaboration to inform effective communication strategies. Number 1, pausing. Number 2, paraphrasing. Number 3, posing questions. Number 4, putting ideas on the table. Number 5, providing data. Number 6, paying attention to self and others. And number 7, and one of my favorites, presuming positive intentions. And with that, I will pass it off to Nena.
Hi, everybody. I'm Nena Bloom. And just to be clear, if you're in the room, there are handouts on your tables with scenarios for later and then the norms of collaboration, which really emerge from the education world. So I'm Nena Bloom. I lead a team of evaluators in the Office of the Vice President for Research here at NAU. And I've been at NAU for 18 years, most of that time as a program evaluator. In our work, we work both pre-award and post-award in our communications. So we thought it was a nice way to start this conversation. So the first thing I wanted to do is share what program evaluation is, because it is a term that definitely generates ideas in everybody's mind. So I wanted to start with a little bit of a conversation about what a program evaluator does. So program evaluation is a systematic inquiry into programs' performance and effectiveness using quantitative and qualitative data. It helps to provide credible evidence for program teams so they can make effective decisions in real time. So evaluation can identify progress and monitor progress on a program, can tell the story of a program by garnering real on-the-ground feedback from participants in your program, can communicate results both to your stakeholders, to yourself, to your program sponsors. The data can work to improve your program, can point out areas where you really need to put more effort in, and ultimately can help you identify areas that you really want to put efforts for moving forward to sustainability. So, pre-award. During the pre-award phase, our team actually is on the proposal writing team. So we help, mainly working with the PI, we help to identify, help them to write measurable goals and objectives for their grants, and then help to identify where we should be evaluating those programs and come together at the evaluation plan. So we actually write that section of the proposal most of the time. Okay, so this is a slight exaggeration. We don't have that much fun when we're writing grants, but we are part of that team and an essential part, and we are often appreciated as such. Okay, and then the grant gets funded, because they all get funded, right? Because the program PI has done an excellent job. The pre-award team has really put their all in. The grant gets funded, and everyone's very excited about that initiative. Well, at this point, our role changes. We are not on the implementation team as external evaluators. We are third-party, quote-unquote, objective third-party evaluators to collect and evaluate that information. So we have to take a step back, and this can garner some ripples in the team. It's a changing role. Everyone's very proud of their new initiative, and it may feel like we are walking in as judges, which is not our intention, of course, but what we want to do in our talk, I want to share is a number of the communication strategies we have developed over the years, so we can get back into working very effectively with that team, because we all know that initiatives are going to be most successful when we are working together and communicating effectively. And so really it's about building trust. So I'm going to share 4 different strategies: presuming positive intentions, paying attention to self and others, pausing, and using data. So in terms of presuming positive intentions, it's really important to reestablish that we're all working for that same goal, an effective program, and to make sure that everyone understands roles and responsibilities. Some of the program team might not have even met us at this point and don't
Am I the only one who had my feed go out?
No, it's all of us. We're in it
Okay.
together now, Amber. I did send them an IM and I'll text Erin as well to see if they can get it going again. It was probably bound to happen, right? Too much
Yeah.
Wi-Fi bandwidth being taken.
Exactly. I didn't see any technical difficulties before this, so we were just due for something. I think we'll just start our own presentation and, you know. So I got a Teams message that said the internet is out at NAU. So I'm not sure what to do about that, but I'll just mute myself for now and be here along with you, Rachel, until we hear something else.
That sounds like a plan. I mean, worst case scenario, I'm very good at winging it and we can totally make it happen because we know the content really well. So
Yeah.
we can do it. But we'll give them the opportunity.
I like it.
Yeah, everyone's now texting me, the internet's down. Got it. Nailed it. So while we're waiting, as we all sit in silence and stare at each other, has everyone been enjoying their sessions? Anything fun, anything, exceptional takeaways or anything that you like to share? I mean, I can say this is the only one I've gone to today, unfortunately, because, right, time and things and all the stuff.
Yeah, I've been to a few, but I also have had a few deadlines today. So
Right.
I've been kind of like working and listening. But I really enjoyed like the first session. It was with Dr. Paul Keim. I think that's his name, correct? I'm very bad at names. But he spoke about like his experiences with anthrax and when there was the whole like anthrax scare, like post 9/11, and assisting like the federal government with like investigations and things like that. And that was very cool. And he mentioned being a part of a docu-series on Netflix where I think he plays himself. So that was fun.
That sounds amazing.
I know.
Wow. Okay, Erin's calling me. Hang on one sec. Let's see if we have some more intel on this.
Also, Amy Warren, I see the message that you just posted in the Q&A section, and we can't see your messages on Q&A, just FYI.
Yay, things are happening. We're doing it. Woohoo. So I think we're back up and running.
Perfect.
Presenters in person, can you hear us?
We can hear you.
Yay! We're all back together again.
Can you hear? Yes. Okay. So just to like rewind about a minute and a half where we were talking about recognizing sensitivity, how to present data that your team might not feel so comfortable seeing. And, again, it's taking that time to build the relationships, build the credibility, remind them we're using credible methods, and also just that, this is early in a project is a time to work on improvement. So it's okay if your project was perfect from year one, then there'd really be no reason to fund 4 or 5 years of a project, right? So it's just acknowledging that reality that sometimes it, takes time to build an effective program.
I also like to use, and I'm sure many of you, if you are supervisors or if you ever have to give feedback to others, you know that the sandwich strategy for providing feedback. Start with the positive, then talk about areas for improvement, and then end with a positive, which is recently even shown on Ted Lasso. So it reminded me of that strategy. So always reminding your team that that data is, can inform and can improve. Why am I not advancing?
Let me try to advance. I was
there we
able
go.
to do it with the.
I was just practicing pausing. That's what I was just doing. So it totally fits into my talk here. So, it's important when you work with the team to come in. You're not always the expert, right? So they're often the expert, and I like to stand back and give them a time to talk about their program. And it's important for me to listen more than I am talking, so I can really find out what's going on in a program and get that information from them. So often just that pause is a good time to get people talking and sharing. So finally, I want to talk about using data. Data is power. So I frame all of my conversations around data. Just like scientists and researchers, and many of us in the room, we use analytics, we use all kinds of things. So having that conversation that's grounded in data really builds credibility and helps people understand their programs. It also helps them as decision makers to know where to work harder, right? I mean, there might be parts of the program that are working very effectively, and the data shows that. So maybe they should be working on other areas instead. So work smarter on other areas. So just on the left, these are just some representations of the types of data we collect. Social network analysis is a way to connect networks and understand how those new networks and collaborations may have an effect on research productivity. And then on the right is some of the qualitative data we may be garnering from interviews or focus groups with participants. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Amber.
Perfect. Thank you, Nena. And if at any point you guys can't hear me, just let me know. I'm always very paranoid about that happening during a presentation. Yeah, I'm super excited to be speaking today alongside Nena, Erin, and Rachel. I'll start by just introducing myself and the perspective I can offer on this topic. So my name is Amber Martin, and I'm a grant and contract officer senior who is stationed in Arizona State University's Central Research Office, also known as the Office of Research and Sponsored Projects Administration, or ORSPA, or Research Operations, or I'm sure I'm forgetting another nickname for us, but those are the big ones. So I'm on the proposals team, and as a part of my job, I review and submit proposals and assist with any of the post-submission requests that come in from sponsors before the award arrives at ASU. So my team and I communicate very frequently with research administrators who are located in departments or in the Central Research Office. And I also communicate with other teams throughout my department. So for example, I may route an incoming agreement to our negotiations team. And I may have to reach out to the post-award teams in my department if I receive a post-award question, or if I'm faced with a situation that kind of blurs the lines between pre and post-award. So the same applies in the inverse. Those teams may reach out to me or someone on my proposals team with a pre-award question. And the two last groups that I wanted to mention probably involve the most internal and external forms of communication I deal with. So within my own proposals group and with the sponsor. And I'm constantly communicating with my colleagues in the proposals group, as we always have questions for each other. And of course, with the sponsor, my group is seen as a kind of liaison on the pre-award end between the sponsor and the department and PI. And so I just kind of wanted to mention all of this to give a little background about how I communicate, why I do, with whom, and the tips that I will mention. Next slide, please. Thank you. First thing I want to say, or start by saying, is that everything I mention moving forward is truly guided by my own experience and the experiences of colleagues who have shared with me. The tips I mentioned are what have worked for me and those colleagues, but of course, I should say I'm generalizing. So you guys on this call and in person may have different experiences and tips based on your environment. I'll be addressing communication tips within the context of these 4 norms of collaboration that were included in the list Nena mentioned earlier. And looking through that list of 7 norms, these 4 are the ones that immediately spoke to me in my experience as a pre-award officer at ASU. Next slide, please. Okay, I have a feeling they may have frozen again. Rachel, are you seeing the same thing I'm seeing?
Yes, ma'am, I am. No
Okay.
movement
Oh, no.
whatsoever. It's you and me now, Amber.
Okay, I got another instant message that says the internet went out again.
Oh gosh.
I know. Well, I think we're halfway through the presentation, kind of, sort of.
Oh
Okay,
wait, they're back. They're back. Things are happening. Wait. Okay. Okay. There we go. Good. Good.
Perfect. Okay, perfect. And someone let me know that stopped right after I mentioned pulling from personal experience. So I'll step back just a few seconds and say I'm pulling from personal experience. So everything I say is hopefully doesn't come across as patronizing or anything like that. It's more so just from my experience and the experience of my colleagues, and what has worked best for me. And so with the 4 communication tips on this slide, these are the ones that kind of spoke to me from the list that Nena mentioned earlier. And I'll be going over these more in depth over the next few slides. Next slide, please. Perfect, thank you. So I speak for myself, and I'm sure some of you on this call, when I say it can be very easy not to pause before responding to someone's words or actions, and to just kind of fire off a response in autopilot mode. I'm sure you guys have had at least once in your career, and definitely at least a few times in your personal life, where you've kind of experienced the conversation style of someone who speaks like they're reading the longest run-on sentence, or who you have to have kind of like a one-sided battle to get in a word. So even outside of those circumstances, pausing before responding to someone reaching out to you and pausing before asking questions is such a great rule of thumb in the workplace. Over the next few slides, I'll be going over some tips I've heard and tips I've gathered through my own experience, all related to this norm. Next slide, please. Perfect. So for some folks, it may come more naturally to speak more than to listen or absorb what others are communicating. But I'll just say it's so important to listen. I may have like a research administrator who reaches out to me via email, or maybe in Teams, or maybe even a phone call, and they want to explain possibly like their perspective on an issue with a budget in the post-submission stage. And it's maybe more so a venting kind of call. So I don't want to spend that time during the call, the RA initiated, talking about my perspective the whole time and barely allowing her a word in. This conversation should be one where the RA is able to voice the concerns she has, and I listen, offering insight and guidance as I can. I also need all of the information I can get before looking into possible solutions. So I listen to the RA, and I'm taking notes and asking questions as needed. Next slide, please. I think it's important to create or help create the kind of environment where your colleagues are allowed a space to speak and a space to absorb. So for instance, I have weekly one-on-ones with each person I supervise. We communicate every day, of course, throughout the day, but that one-on-one is meant as a space for that person to speak about their week and ask questions or mention things they're working on. And after that, the employee has had their, or after the employee has had their turn to speak, I then have the floor to speak about new developments and mention ongoing or new tasks and projects, and maybe even any questions I have. And I actually have the same one-on-one format with my supervisor as well. And I feel like it's just a great way to listen, speak, absorb, just have a dedicated space for like time to talk with each other. Next slide. So some of you may disagree, but for me, the answer to this question is no, 98% of the time. Constant interruptions lead, in my experience at least, to a breakdown in communication that may result in one party checking out of that conversation, which eventually leads to gaps that could have been filled by an otherwise fruitful discussion. So for example, if I'm on a call with a sponsor, and this call is meant to clarify the requirements of a post-submission request on the sponsor side and ask questions about those requirements on the ASU side, I'm giving the sponsor space to speak because I need to hear what all they're requiring. I don't want to keep interrupting the sponsor during the call, especially because it's just honestly on a more common sense level, not great conversation practice. Next slide, please. So for my next section, I will get into the benefits of posing questions to foster fruitful and helpful communication. Next slide. Thank you. So asking questions to understand a topic is probably the most common reason behind asking questions. If you're confused by a situation or topic and your own search for answers has yielded no results, I think it's helpful to just reach out to your colleague or a trusted colleague with questions that you have. Even if your own search does yield results, but you don't feel comfortable with your findings, I don't think it helps, or it does help. It doesn't hurt at all to ask questions. Getting that kind of conversation going builds trust. Next slide, please. So I actually didn't learn about the concept of coaching until I attended supervisor development program last year. And in short, posing the right questions to your colleagues and maybe most importantly, thank you, to those you supervise can enable that person to find a solution to a question or a situation that works best for them without them having to be told what the solution is. So there's kind of a level of trust to coaching on both the receiving and giving end. And as with all the communication tips that I mentioned, I think building and keeping trust is such an important backbone to a healthy workplace and healthy interactions within that workplace. Next slide, please. So let's say you're hosting a meeting and no one wants to speak. I feel like that happens probably very frequently. One method that may help get things running and people speaking is asking questions. So naturally, when a question is asked, a person may feel compelled to answer, or you would hope at least one person, like a crowd of 30, feel compelled to answer. Let's say you're the organizer of a quiet team meeting. You may ask a question like, who here has had a sponsor request no ERE escalation to the group, just to get things running. Next slide, please. So paying attention to yourself and to others is another norm that spoke to me. It really comes down to being aware of your inner and outer surroundings and being grounded. Being grounded at least some of the time is essential for the work that we do. And it's work, that has solid real world applications and implications, and work that requires real world communication and interactions. Next slide, please. So first thing I'll say is I had to include the picture on the right of the slide because It's Always Sunny is my favorite show. And I just needed a way to kind of put that in the PowerPoint, But instead of assuming, I like to err on the side of caution and ask questions if need be. So if a research administrator tells me that the F&E rate of a proposal is 15%, but offers no documentation, just as an example, I wouldn't assume that the sponsor is the one who is issuing this rate. So I'll ask the RA to provide documentation and writing of sponsor policy, just as an example. Next slide, please. So you are probably already or will get tired of hearing me say ask questions, but I'm going to say it again. If you don't know the answer to something or need more details to develop a fuller picture of a situation, just ask questions. So maybe the conversation you're engaged in requires you to ask the quote unquote right questions, or questions that you think maybe the person you're speaking to is trying to ask without directly asking. So you don't want to assume what the other person is trying to get across, but you also want to get to the bottom of what they're trying to say. Next slide, please. So I included this slide because I think it's important to build trust with others, but also with yourself. Maybe you have a preference when it comes to communication style. Maybe you're starting to become burnt out and need a break, if possible, from communicating in a certain situation. I think it's important to be compassionate to yourself. And it's something that's very easy to forget. And it's important to allow yourself time and space to breathe, including at work, if possible. Next slide, please. So I wanted to also speak about presuming positive intentions, because with our jobs being customer service oriented, with our jobs involving so much interaction with others, I think it's important to presume positive intentions, or at least to give others the benefit of the doubt if possible. Next slide, please. Perfect. So I slipped the slide in because I think it's important to help foster a positive environment if that's the kind of environment you want to exist in. It's not enough to just want people to reach out to you and interact with you in all of your preferred ways. If you would like to attend meetings, where not everything is like negative and doom and gloom, and there's also space to speak about your achievements and the achievements of others, I think it's important that you also put out that energy in those meetings, dedicating time to speaking about achievements and positive developments, and allowing others to spend time speaking about those things as well. Next slide, please. So it's important to remember that everyone communicates differently. So for example, some people prefer phone communication and others, like myself, strongly prefer written communication, maybe like in the form of emails and instant messaging. Another aspect of this is the fact that not everyone's tone is the same when communicating, especially when it applies to written communication. So for example, there are plenty of people probably on this call that I communicate with on a normal basis. I know I like to slip in smiley faces and exclamation points, sometimes too many in hindsight. It's just my way of adding what I perceive to be positivity to my messages. But I know not everyone communicates that way. And I know not everyone communicates with fluffy things like that and just communicate very matter-of-factly, which is normal. And so I know this is work and that the person I'm speaking to is just doing their job. And I'm not going to take a lack of exclamation point or smiley face or, a please to heart. I'm going to move on and consider it a normal communication. Next slide, please. So if there is ever a situation where someone is rude or just seems to have a change in tone in their correspondence, whether it's in writing or via call or in a meeting, I'm always aware that it's possible that the person I'm speaking to may have things going on in their work or personal life that are affecting things. So I say that to say, if I ever have a negative experience with a sponsor or coworker that really comes down to negative communication, I always give that person the benefit of the doubt, mainly because I don't know what's going on in their lives to possibly contribute to this interaction. And I'm not going to take myself so seriously that I assume that it's a me problem, basically. Yeah, and I think that may be it for my slides. So with that, I will pass things along to Rachel and Erin. Thank you.
Can everybody hear me? Okay. Okay, yeah, so we have heard from Nena, who is an evaluator with NAU, and we have heard from Amber, who is in the Central Pre-Award role at ASU. And now Rachel and I are going to represent the University of Arizona in our section. A little bit about me. So I work as a senior research administrator on a team called this proposal support team under sponsored project services. This is a relatively new team and a new role on campus for the College of Science and for the RII centers and institutes. And so what we do is we serve as the liaison between the faculty and the central pre-award team to develop and route and submit proposals. And we handle all the pre-award duties up until the time of award. I am embedded in a department, which is a unique part of our team. I'm embedded in geosciences and ecology and evolutionary biology. And I'm just showing a few of the icons of my alumni and places of employment. So I've visited a few universities in my time.
Well, now it's my turn. Thank you, Erin. I'm Rachel Rice, and I'm the Director for Pre-Award and Proposal Support Services within the central office and at Sponsor Project Services, that is, at the University of Arizona. I'm a bit of a house divided. I do work for the University of Arizona, but I've received all of my formal education from Arizona State University. So go Devils, right? Yeah. As you see there, I have a picture of Old Main. I do appreciate that picture, quite frankly, because it's been around since the 1800s. That building has been around for forever, and to think about who's crossed in front of it, the many eclipses it has witnessed, and all the other things really just, makes me feel warm and fuzzy inside when I walk by it. So, as I said, I work for the University of Arizona. I do have two teams. One is more proposal development, right? They typically work more so with principal investigators, business managers within the departments to help develop those budgets and justifications and making sure we have enough funding for, all of the costs, because research is expensive. And then I govern govern over the pre-award team, who is the central office, and they serve as the authorized organizational representatives on behalf of the University of Arizona. So they review and submit on behalf in an official capacity. So with that, next slide, please. All right, so we're going to talk about some of the communication strategies for intra-institutional perspectives, right? So one, again, my favorite, presuming positive intentions. Number two, pausing to think, that's a little wink, little segue into what's to come before responding or asking a question. And then finally, paying attention to self and others. Next slide, please. So let's talk about feedback, right? The good, the bad, and the written, as it were. So how can we give effective feedback without poking the bear? Because sometimes we don't always know what's going on the other side of that email, that instant message, the direct message, whatever the message may be. So making sure that we can effectively give feedback without causing undue issues. Next slide, please. Oh, a little pokey, right? Don't want to poke that bear. Watch out. Next slide, please. Gotta add some levity somewhere, right, guys? All right, so let us set the stage, shall we? Well, here we are, we're presenting at a forum, right? It's a massive audience, probably a good 100 people or so have shown up to this presentation to talk about, well, something that is not your topic. It's not something that you own. It's not relevant really to your job necessarily, but it's something that definitely needs to be presented to the research community at large. So it may be a new policy or protocol, but it's definitely going to add more work to the collective, whether it be the compliance and regulatory offices that need to review, whether it be the research administrators who are assisting the principal investigators, or at the centralized office where we have to view and make sure that all of these things have actually been taken care of. So there's a lack of explanation, just typically speaking, and general confusion around this topic up until this point, but it is your due diligence, right, to deliver that information and educate the campus on what exactly is going on here. So let's take a walk through what we can do to make that a little bit easier moving forward. Next slide, please. Thank you.
Yeah, so this is a scenario where you are kind of in the hot seat. It's your job to disseminate the new policy or the new rule or the new process to an audience of your peers who are already overburdened and overworked and overloaded. So, they may be receiving this in certain ways, and you may be having certain feelings as you're giving this information, and there can be a whirlwind of emotions. And, this could be set the stage for some maybe unskillful communication, let's just say. So this might be your first reaction. Oh, no. What do I have to do? What do I have to add into my process? And how long is this going to take me? Oh, no. So a few suggestions are to, maintain professionalism, hold your game face. Don't send that emotion-filled email right away. Press pause and save it as a draft. Come back to it in the morning. If you have mentors, peer mentors, a council team, somebody that you can go to if it's really an issue that you need to crowdsource advice from, please do that. Scream into your pillow. This could be something that's really rocking your world and you're having a very severe reaction. It happens all the time. So how can we be more compassionate as we're giving feedback? Just handing it off to Rachel.
Oh, thank you. So, I often like to add tools, right, to help and assist with these different scenarios. And, why not add another acronym to the world of acronyms we currently live in, right? So as I was data mining the internet, trying to figure out, there has to be somewhere out there that's come up with something that, I don't have to reinvent the wheel, right? We've thought about empathy. We've thought about how we interact in an age where everything is written, right? The tone is typically lost in an email. How do we gain back that level of humanity when we're communicating via text, via IM, via, email and all of those things? Well, I stumbled upon Dr. Alicia Goldstein's The Now Effect. And, as it says there, he is a leader in mindfulness psychology, but he also talks a lot about, how do we, again, lead with empathy and regain that human connection, as opposed to just, let's just shoot off an email and just see where it goes. Well, no, there's somebody on the other side of that email who is receiving it, right? Who is reacting to it and responding to it. So how do we, encourage that empathy and evolve ourselves and how we actually respond? Well, he encourages us to think. And that is an acronym we are now going to walk through before we speak. Next slide, please. So think, right? We're going to say that a lot. So get ready for thinking all the things. Think of these 5 questions. Next slide, please. So T, is it true? H, is it helpful? I, is it insightful? And is it necessary? And finally, K, is it kind? Next slide, please. So let's see here. T, right? Is it true? Is the feedback being provided factual, or is it an emotive response? So as we've talked about throughout this presentation, right? You have that knee-jerk reaction, you receive that email, and now you're sitting there holding on to everything that's been received from it, whether it be a tone that's been perceived, whether, you know, it's at the end of the day, you've briefly seen it and you're kind of moving on, but again, you're still responding to it in your head and thinking about it the night all over through the night. Sometimes when you wake up at 3 in the morning and think about that email that you last read. Well, I would definitely say read it the next day. Come back to it with a fresh mind, an open heart, and an open mind to be able to receive the information that's being sent to you. Because sometimes when we read it at the end of the day or briefly or whatever the case may be, wherever our mindset might be sitting, it might be more of an emotive response rather than factual. So, you know, just think to yourself, is this true? Are we responding to something that's true? Or did we kind of, you know, again, that whirlwind of emotion, did we just very quickly have an emotive response?
So H, so is it helpful? So are you, as Rachel mentioned, experiencing and reflecting your emotions in your response? And it's just sort of a knee-jerk reaction? Or is what the feedback you're providing to your peers in this scenario going to help? It's going to add a helpful suggestion. We don't want to add fuel to the fire.
All right, is it insightful? So is the feedback being provided giving perspective or a more accurate understanding? Many times, you know, if you volleyed emails back and forth, likely you're not understanding the other person's perspective or where they're coming from. Sometimes it's just better to pick up the phone and have a conversation with a human being and understand the tone, maybe have some more perspective into what they might be reading and how they might be interpreting to better reach across the aisle and find that common ground. You know, because sometimes we're so stuck in the policy or the perceived tone or whatever the case may be that we can't really see the forest for the trees, right? So making sure that we're giving that more accurate understanding and providing perspective can be so helpful and better understanding how to appeal to the person you're trying to appeal to get them to understand policy or whatever the case may be. But it really just kind of lightens everything to offer a level of insight as opposed to just kind of hammering home that message.
So again, N, is it necessary? Are you adding value to the conversation? Is it a constructive comment or response that somebody can then take to the next step? You know, is your comment? Yeah, is it needed to move the subject forward? So.
And K, right? The last letter of our fun acronym to think, is it kind? Is the feedback being provided leading with empathy? So as you know, as we've all mentioned in each portion of this, we don't know what's going on the other side of that email thread. We don't know what's going on in their personal lives. And that really plays a part in how we are as human beings in our professional careers and interacting with each other. So making sure that we're leading with empathy and really trying to hone in on that, you know, that human connection is really important. And I feel like it can also offer a really softened tone because then that person's going to be more apt to say, okay, I'm going to go to Erin again, because you know what, she really took the time to help me to understand and was so kind with her time and just helping me further. I'm just going to keep going back because clearly she knows what she's talking about, but she can represent it in a way that's helpful to me. Next slide, please. And if all else fails, think of the Queen of Soul herself, right? Aretha Franklin. You better think, right? Think about what you're trying to do to me, because that's what we're doing every time we send that email, every time we have that emotive response. We're really affecting somebody else on the other side. So I do hope that think is something that really helps all of you.
All right, so we wanted to give a few minutes in case you have any questions at this time. And we have a runner who will bring the mic to you so that our virtual attendees can hear your question. Does anybody have a relatable experience they want to share?
Hello, my name's Megan. I'm from ASU. I just wanted to share one tip that I actually learned from another conference was someone had spoken about setting their email on delayed send. So all of your emails goes on delayed send for 5 minutes so they can go back and they can sit and think about it, and they have 5 minutes or 10 minutes to go back and change it. So that's something that I did now, so I can just go back, if I have that weird feeling about, oh, I don't know how that's going to sit, you can always go back and update it before it goes out. So that's just a tip that I learned that I wanted to share.
Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thanks, Megan. It's a good suggestion.
So I have a tip, kind of similar with the delayed send, but what I do is if I really think it's going to cause some problem, I sit on it overnight. I write it, type it up, think about it overnight, and then look at it in the morning and go, is this really necessary? Is there a better way I can do it?
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Something I use in my work as well. Thank you for that.
So one thing I used to like to do when we used to work in person was I would have one of my coworkers read an email that I was personally reading with a very harsh tone or like something snarky. I grab somebody who had no context, no background about what this email was about, and just read it how you interpret it. And it's just it made such a difference to add that tone to the email, change it from you automatically assuming it's a snarky email to somebody else, being like, this is a normal email. So that was always helpful.
Thanks. It's very hard to interpret tone in email. So that's a great suggestion. Have somebody else suggest what maybe a different tone there could be compared to what you heard. Yeah. Okay.
Hi.
Yeah.
I just had a quick question.
Sure.
How do you make presenting in person or in front of a group of people easier?
Who wants to feel that? I know I'm
I can try. I mean, I've done it both in person and online, and I will say that practicing is really going to make it perfect, right? And similar to the comment that was just left, I mean, if you have like a mock audience, that's also super helpful. And I know it's awful to listen to yourself on the other side of it, but recording yourself is also very helpful because then you can see kind of your facial expressions. What am I doing too much of? How awkward is this? Like, what does it actually look like? So I think practice definitely makes perfect. And if you can have a live audience to practice in front of, it's so helpful. Oh my goodness. Especially if they know you and they're like, Rachel, you're really rolling your eyes a lot or whatever the case may be. Very helpful.
Okay. Yes. One more. We'll take one more.
Thanks so much for your presentation. One of the strategies I use as a supervisor is trying to determine whether somebody's going to need some time to process some of my feedback privately before I'm there. So sometimes I will actually send someone an email in advance to say, I'm going to schedule some time to talk with you tomorrow, but here's some of this initial feedback and I want you to think about it, or later in the day. For some of my folks that I know, if I just say it in a meeting, they're going to explode and say things that they're going to regret to me later. So that's been really helpful for me in certain scenarios.
Oh, that's fantastic. For all of you in managerial and supervisorial roles, that's a great suggestion.
I know you guys said just one, but someone just a question. This is on.
Okay, so the question is, how can you best communicate with people who are short on time when you would like to cover a complex topic and have a written record, I guess, of the conversation?
I can answer from the perspective of working with PIs. If I'm trying to explain something pretty complex to a PI and they're short on time, what I'll try to do is I'll give a summary and then follow up with details later in a different communication format, such as email. Anybody else want to field that one?
I agree. I think follow up with the email is definitely helpful because it level sets expectations that may have been missed if you really have a small window of time and you kind of have to rush through. But then you can also set up subsequent times, whenever they're available or to answer questions that may have come from the follow-up email. I think that's always helpful. But like Amber, I prefer having things written so that we can all have the same level set of expectations so we can refer back to it later. And maybe if we have to have more clarifying questions or conversations, it's helpful to have something to kind of spawn off of.
We like to provide key points summarized up front and then, but still provide all the data so people have access to all the data. And that helps them make decisions and look through at a later time what we have found from the project. So if you're all okay with it, we'd like to move on to your work, which are scenarios. Do we have a few minutes?
So we have
10 minutes. We can at least get through one scenario.
maybe two.
Yes. So next slide.
So what I'm gonna do, oh wait. So this was our transition slide. Slide on.
Yeah.
So what I'm gonna do is read this. This is a specific scenario. Oh yeah, thank you. And then we're gonna give you 2 minutes or so to talk to the folks that are closest to you about different approaches. You have the handout of the norms of communication to refer to. So here it is. You're a central office post-award administrator with a hefty inbox. You try to respond or acknowledge to all emails within 48 hours. However, you have a department colleague who demands quick responses. You've noticed that if you don't respond to their emails within 2 to 4 hours, they forward the email to your supervisor and copy you. And this has slowly soured you on this colleague, but you would like to reach a middle ground with them. What communication strategies would you use? So we're not going to talk for maybe 2 minutes. It's your turn to talk, and then we'll come back and here's some ideas. For virtual attendees, we're going to get you next on the next scenario, so just hold on. It's number like 2. Now they can talk to each other. They haven't talked the whole hour. I have too many things. Okay, wrap it up in about 30 more seconds. And then oh, about the 30 seconds? Yeah. Oh, no, we'll call to retention. Yeah. We're gonna try to squeeze one more in for the virtual folks. Okay, I'm back. Who has a good strategy for this scenario? You sound like you do. Megan.
Oh, do you want me to take it? Oh, okay. Sure, I'll take it. Okay. Yes. So our strategy is first pausing, taking some time to take it in, and understand, and then the next one we would do is paying attention to self and others. So having a conversation and letting them know, hey, I understand this is your needs and this is the expectations you have of me and my response to your emails. And I understand why it is important to you. But with my current workload, this is what we can do. And then you're going to roll right into putting ideas on the table. So here are some ideas on moving forward and how we can work together better. That's all I have.
I love that. That was demonstrated empathy,
I'll just hold
working
it.
together, finding a common goal. I love that. Great. Who else has a strategy?
So I've actually had this happen to me in my previous job, and I didn't answer within literally 2 hours, but I was working on a project and they sent it to my boss, and my boss sent it back to them and told them that she would get back to you. She has a policy of getting back to people within 24 hours. She's working on a project for me. So
Yay, boss.
I was like, but the first thing I do is I try to meet with PIs or department chairs or whoever it is that I'm working with. And I let them know at the beginning, if we don't answer your email right away within 24 hours, you're more than welcome to contact me through Skype if it's urgent. Otherwise, at the most 48 hours, we will try to get back to you.
That's great. That's clear communication of a boundary. This is what I can do for you. Yeah. Yeah, we're going to try to squeeze another one in virtually. So I think we're going to bounce forward to scenario 3 and Amber will lead this one off.
Yes, thank you guys. Okay, so I'll read this really quickly. You are a central office pre-award grant and contract officer who frequently interacts with the departmental research administrator. A deadline of April 1st, 2 p.m. was set for a proposal you and the RA were assisting with. At 3 p.m., you realized the deadline was 2 p.m. instead of 5 p.m. A lot of times, I know. And you notified the RA. The RA called you immediately, yelling at you for ruining this proposal submission and not mentioning that the deadline was at 2 p.m. Which communication strategies would you use? So we'll give you guys on the virtual side a little bit to think about this, and you can, I think, put in the Q&A or chat what communication strategies you'd use. I'm not sure if you can unmute yourself at all at this stage, but if you can.
And Amber, to let you know, the in-person group can't see chat responses. So if you could sort of verbalize those, that'd be great.
Yes, definitely. Okay. Don't see anything yet, but I am looking. Okay, someone said breathe, and then another person said I would never yell at our SPS. I need them too much. And that's very sweet. I wish everyone felt that way. I think most of everyone feels that way, but
most of the time, right?
yeah, right? On a good day. Has anyone ever, I mean, let's consider this a safe space. Has anyone ever experienced anything like this or similar to this? And how did you handle it? Even if you don't think you handled it in the perfect way. I see someone said, if on the phone, I would pause and say, I need to call you back. She's like, I think that's how I would handle it too. Definitely a pause, so that I don't react or meet their energy, you know.
Are you done with it or are you still?
I might again.
So we're going to wrap up by reading off. Amber can read off some of the responses in the chat. And then you have the other 2 scenarios just to continue to chat on, over dinner or in your Zoom world.
I have one more response. Someone said, I'm a person who usually will meet someone else's energy, but I'm trying to save this.
Can you be quiet so we can hear what's going on in the chat? Thanks.
Can you guys hear me now?
We can hear you.
Okay. So someone said, I'm a person who usually will meet someone else's energy, but I'm trying to save this draft. which is hilarious. Someone else said I would definitely put myself in their shoes. How many times have we been in a position that we have made the mistake of deadlines? And that's very true.
Any others you want to read off, Amber?
I'm not, did you guys hear when I mentioned one that was like, if on the phone, I would pause and say, I need to call you back. And then someone mentioned breathe. And then someone else mentioned I would never yell at our SPS. I need them too much. And those are the responses we've received so far, which I think are really good responses and honest, which I respect.
Well, on that note, I think we need to wrap up.
Thanks, everybody, for having us.